It is the American Racing Snobs. I am Tony Rizzuti, and I'm joined, as always, by former ESPN the Magazine Formula One correspondent Eric Morse. And Eric, Brazil delivered. Interlagos between the lakes. It was like the lakes all just piled into the racetrack, swirled around in a circle, and spit out chaos. What an incredible Formula One weekend.
That is going to be a memorable result for so many reasons. Two first-time podium finishers in Formula One, and neither one of them, sadly, was Nico Hülkenberg. Not just because he was my midfield MVP. He did pick up a late penalty, but I don't think he was really on for that fight as it was. But how about, first of all, Pierre Gasly? What a feel-good story that was.
Outstanding.
Coming home in second, out-dragging Lewis Hamilton up the same straightaway where Hamilton clinched his first world championship by passing Timo Glock in 2008. How about that Honda horsepower?
Yeah.
They got some ponies.
Unbelievable. And I think the Honda people said it's as much as their ability with a smaller turbocharger to be able to spool up quicker in the higher altitude, as well as the fact that those cars are so efficient, they were able to run a little less downforce than maybe the Mercedes were running there. But, yeah, incredible for Gasly, and this is a continuation of the story that we have said since he went back. He's just driving like the Pierre Gasly that we all saw coming up through the junior ranks when he was at Toro Rosso before. It's like if you take the pressure off, he delivers, and it makes me wonder, and we'll get to this later, if maybe that pressure that sits on Sebastian Vettel being on that red team, if that causes some mistakes. But Pierre Gasly,
go back to Toro Rosso too?
I don't know if he wants to go that far back, but obviously the pressure is getting to him. We'll talk about that. But like we said, Albon was having a tremendous drive. He was on his way to a podium, and so it just feels like that move at midseason was a win-win for the Red Bull franchise.
Christian Horner looks like a genius right now. Absolute genius, putting both of those drivers in position to claim a podium for the first time in both of their careers at Brazil. It didn't work out for Albon. We'll get into that later. Also, huge kudos to Carlos Sainz.
Yes.
He broke a Formula One record. You know which one that is?
I was going to say longest time without a podium.
Most starts before your first podium.
Yeah.
New record holder, Carlos Sainz, in his 101st race.
Not a record you want to have, but it beats not having a podium at all. As you mentioned, Nico Hülkenberg, everybody's kind of like, oh, Hülkenberg's got to be on suicide watch
here. Yeah, he's got one more shot to make some magic happen. But these opportunity races, they're few and far between. Really, this year is just Germany and Brazil where the order was shaken up by either the weather or, in this case, some safety cars and some red cars crashing into each other. I'm sure we'll get into that as well.
To be honest, I don't even really know where to start, other than to say lots of times when you have a chaotic podium and just nutso finishes and things you didn't expect, i.e. Germany, it had to have been because of something that either happened out of the norm or that happened at the very end. I feel like this race delivered from start to finish. I found if it wasn't up front, it was two or three cars back, or it was in the middle, or it was all the way in the back with Sainz coming up through the field, Leclerc coming up through the racing was fantastic. Just fantastic.
The interesting thing to me was that we had a real fight on pure pace between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton.
Yep.
Lewis Hamilton has nothing to lose. Everything's all wrapped up. I think they're testing things out for next year, but they can really throw the kitchen sink at the strategy. So they tried a couple bold moves, went for the undercut a couple times, trying to get the better of Max Verstappen there, even though the pace was close, but I'm not sure that the silver car had it on pure pace to get around Max Verstappen. They put on a hell of a show. And then towards the end, Mercedes kind of got a little caught out, I think, by that pit stop when they told Lewis Hamilton to box opposite Max. It set him up for a lose-lose situation with the entire field packed up on fresh tires and Lewis Hamilton on used mediums. And then I'm not sure if they were throwing good strategy after bad when they decided to pit him on that second late safety car. That was curious, extremely curious.
Motorsport.com, I don't remember who wrote it, and I apologize to the writer, called it clumsy. That Mercedes was clumsy, and that maybe Red Bull forced them into being clumsy. Of course, this was the first race Toto Wolff wasn't at.
There are two
James
factors,
Allison was in charge. In your opinion, did Red Bull force the clumsiness, or was a lack of Toto Wolff a lack in details? James Allison said he really didn't do anything more than he normally does, other than one little media thing and a little coffee with Chase Carey that all the team principals sit in. How do you see that?
I think a bigger factor than Toto's absence was the fact that these championships are done, and they can take risks just trying to get a win, whereas, playing Red Bull's game and running for second place and trying to force them into a mistake the old-fashioned way might have been the Mercedes game plan all season. It's unusual that you would change your game plan, but I don't really think it had a lot to do with Toto's absence. I think it had to do with the fact of, we have nothing to lose, let's try something here. And I'll be damned, it almost worked. We can get into that Hamilton-Albon contact in just a little bit, but if he clears Albon in that corner, he's got a real shot at getting after Max Verstappen, at least finishing second and possibly pushing him into lead. Was that contact, that was on the final lap or the next lap?
No, I think it was next to lap. Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think it was next to lap.
I think you're correct. So if he gets him there, he's got a lap and a half with the fresher tires to see if he can harry Max Verstappen into a mistake. It may not have been the right call, but it sure as hell was the entertaining call.
Yeah. I think Peter Windsor said yesterday on the very first safety car, a safety car that's a given. That's a free pit stop. Why would you have not taken that pit stop then? They kind of got forced at the end, and it was just going to be too chaotic at the end. He kind of questioned why they didn't take it the first time as well.
They were trying to do something that Max wasn't. We've seen Lewis pull off some magical defenses this year on old tires.
But Max wasn't going to get, relegated to 13th. He was going to be right behind him with the wave around.
Oh, I think we knew even before the safety car came in that it was the wrong call. But I love when a crew chief has the guts to say, see that guy we're racing? Do whatever he doesn't do. Because they weren't making an impression on him in the straight fight. They tried the undercut earlier. They knew if they pitted with him, they'd probably come out right behind him. That Red Bull crew, Jesus, they're on fire. 1.53 second pit stop earlier in that race, a new world record.
And as good as Verstappen was, really controlling that race, it almost all came to an end when Williams let Kubica out on his pit stop with that release, and Verstappen had to jam on the brake. It could have ended right there.
And Max had to fight Lewis for that position back. And I think that might have been the most entertaining race I've ever seen at Interlagos. That track, I mean, it's had some classic moments, but overall, top to bottom, like you said earlier,
we stood at our house on the final restart. We stood for probably 3 laps. Of course, my son's just going 8 bananas for Albon, right? He's thinking Albon's got a chance to win this thing. He's going nuts, totally gutted at the end. I was gutted at the end. We'll talk about that in a second. You want to get into the Ferrari stuff?
Yeah, let's get that out of the way.
Once again.
Because Ferrari at least got that out of the way. Luckily for them, this is a meaningless point in a lame duck season for Ferrari. If they do that, when something important is on the line, like earlier when they are fighting for a world championship, what's the first rule of motorsports? We say this all the time. Don't wreck your teammate.
Yep.
Don't wreck your teammate on a freaking straightaway.
It's not the first time that Vettel's done that.
That was just
He did that
careless.
back in 2010, I think, at Turkey. Same exact thing.
With Weber?
Yeah, just started moving. He continues to. He should have been penalized. We talked about this at Mexico City. I was happy that they let him race. But he pulled the same stunt at Mexico City as if Lewis wasn't even there. I'm just going to keep coming until you bail out. At some point in time, when that's your move, it's going to bite you, and his history is that's his move.
That is now back-to-back DNFs for Sebastian Vettel. Not his fault in Austin with the suspension failure.
No, this one was 100% his fault, and for him to try to even remotely blame Leclerc is incredible.
Yeah, not a good look.
The man has lost his shit.
Just when you think he's back on track.
Yeah.
you go and do something like this and totally unredeem yourself.
Yeah, I saw there's an interesting meme, I think that's what they call them, on social media of this guy kind of like talking trash in this girl's ear, but you can't hear what he's saying, but you see her emotions like, oh, come on, like, stop rapping at me. And somebody said, caption this. And one of our Racing Snobs people who work on this show, their caption was, yeah, Tony Rizzuti is going to try to defend Vettel for getting into his teammate, and he's also going to tell us he's happy because Max is his guy. Well, I'm not going to defend Vettel. It was 100%
it was indefensible.
Vettel's fault, and he just loses his mind at times, and to just start moving over on somebody is ridiculous. And I am going to claim Max is my guy. I was happy at the end. Max is my guy. I've said it from the get-go. You can go pull the tape, and I know you're not allowed to like Duke and Carolina, but I like Max and Red Bull. I do. I'm just Italian. I have to root for red. I have to. My soul, my gut, and everything has to root for red. My heart likes Red Bull. It's just where I'm at.
So now that we've kind of gone through
what do they do?
The red card.
What do they do?
They got to do something. You can't just let this go. They've had issues.
This is in my opinion, Eric, not to cut you off, but this is in my opinion, I think Leclerc has outdriven out everything Vettel so much that he just is hanging on for. He's overdriving the shit out of everything to prove a point that he's still the guy. And every time he does one of these stupid things, it makes him more and more not look like the guy.
It looks to me like Charles Leclerc has taken up residence inside Sebastian Vettel's head.
Ooh, who's done that before?
Yeah, no kidding.
Like everybody that's ever been a teammate of his, with the exception of Kimi, who really just, that's not his style.
You could make a case that Sebastian definitely had the measure of Mark Webber. Sebastian made fools of everyone who raced alongside of him at Toro Rosso. I think that was, Bourdais and maybe Buemi.
But Ricciardo...
Yeah, Ricciardo
totally scrambled his eggs.
Yeah, in that 1 year, Ricciardo looked really good. And now Leclerc, and that's what made it even worse, was that he made the mistake crashing into his teammate. You can't do that. No. You just can't. They're not going to stand for that in Maranello. And
it was the second straight race in which Mattia Binotto admitted that they had gone with more downforce, less top speed type setup. They feel like they were equal with Mercedes and Red Bull in the corners, and just didn't have the straight line speed out of purpose. Man, I don't know. Since the break at Singapore, they had the top speed and they had closed the gap in the cornering. I get it.
But what they were missing was tire life. So they're trying to find that you can't have all three, and I think they're trying to find the right compromise on what to base next year's car on. Because, yeah, you want top speed, you want the cornering, but if you find a way to get a good mix of those two elements, but it destroys your tires, you're still not going to win many races. Experimentation notwithstanding, I think what made this a classic was the safety cars. You had the Bottas hydraulic failure, which brought out the first safety car, and then you had the two red cars.
Did you think the safety periods were too long? They seemed awfully long.
They did. I don't know the specific logistical challenges that kind of face the track workers in terms of getting cars off the grid at one track versus another.
Yeah,
but
when you think back at Japan when they were able to clean up Kubica, and who was the other person who hit the wall right there? One of the Haas cars, Magnussen, I think, right at the start of qualifying. They got them both cleaned up. Cars were back in the garage within 7 minutes.
One thing that's working against you at Interlagos is it's a short lap.
Yeah.
So if you crash at Suzuka, and I'll use this as a race example. I know both of your examples were in qualifying, but you complete fewer laps behind the safety car when it's a longer circuit. Because you're clicking by the start-finish line more frequently at a track like Interlagos, that could make it feel like it's taking a longer time because you're seeing that number click off and go, oh, that was 5 laps.
Well, according to Lewis, the safety car was moving really slow, too.
He was
not happy with that.
Poor Burnt. He never goes fast enough for Lewis. That's what a cool job that would be.
Oh,
even if
amazing,
Lewis is constantly bitching at you.
All right, let's talk about then Lewis's contact with Albon towards the end of the race.
So they put him in a hero or zero situation by pinning him. He came out in third or fourth. got by Gasly. If he gets by Albon, he has a chance to win this race. Danny Ricciardo got a penalty earlier in the race, and I want to use that as the baseline. I thought that Ricciardo's move was okay until he locked up and came off the bottom, and I think that's why he got that penalty for contact earlier. Lewis, it was a bit of a lunge. It was a little optimistic, but he was there, and he didn't come off the bottom. Albon could have made that a lot easier for both of them, because we saw this earlier with Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. You were able to keep the momentum. If you had a car on the apex to the inside of you, you could hang on to those positions, especially since they were both on reasonably fresh rubber. I know Lewis's was much fresher because he had just pitted, but we weren't that far removed from the free pit stop that the Red Bulls took under the first safety car. I think that the penalty was a little surprising to me. It was probably the least harsh driving offense I've ever seen get penalized. And I think that's because Lewis said, that was my fault. I shouldn't have tried that.
100%. He didn't even go see the stewards when he was called. They sent somebody. They sent sporting director Rod Meadow, and he went in there and said, Lewis says it was his fault.
And I think that's the only reason he got the penalty.
And I only think he did that because it was Albon.
I think Lewis felt terrible that he ruined somebody's chance to get on the podium.
I think if he'd have done that to somebody else, one of the veterans, he'd have fought it a little bit. Plus, it's wrapped up. I think he genuinely, they have in-car camera from somebody's car that was still on that he went and found Albon when he got out of his car and hugged him and said, that's 100% my fault. I personally think Albon left way too open a gap and then cut across Lewis's nose. Now, Lewis took a dive bomb kind of entry into it, but to me,
he got baited into that.
Yeah, to me, that right there is a racing deal. If you're going to open it up that much, I'm going to try to take it, and hopefully we don't. That's what I want the stewards to let go, and I think they would have. I think that's why it took so long. I think Lewis telling the world in every opportunity, that was my bad, that was my bad. That I think that's why the penalty came.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it didn't look like a penalty. It was not a slam dunk to me.
I didn't think so.
I hated that they made contact. I wanted to see both of those cars on the podium, because anytime that you put yourself in a situation where you've got 2 laps to come slashing through the field, that's a driver I want to see succeed, whether it's my guy Lewis Hamilton or not. I love the strategy call. High entertainment factor on it. I wanted to see it pay off no matter who was in that situation, but especially for Albon, the dude deserved to be on the podium, despite the fact that, you take Bottas out of it, you take the 2 red cars out of it, and then ultimately you give Hamilton a penalty. That's almost all of your big guns in F1 having an issue. Max has the clean race. He's standing on the top step, and then all of a sudden you've got an opportunity where I feel badly, by the way, that Carlos Sainz didn't get to celebrate his podium because of the nature. Hamilton was 3rd on the road, almost 2nd on the road. He was kind of robbed of that moment. That would have been cool. I hope Carlos gets a chance to properly enjoy a podium finish sometime in the near future. Yeah, I do too.
They did take him. He was still there. Everybody waited around to see what they were going to rule, because there was a feeling. What was funny was the first ruling they put out was the 5-second penalty to Lewis. The problem was Sainz was under investigation for using DRS during a yellow flag situation.
And he wasn't the only one. They ended up...
At one point in time, it looked like Antonio Giovinazzi may end up in that 3rd position if everybody was going to get penalized for it.
He ended up, 5th?
Yes, which
Alfa
was a great
Romeo, by the way.
Another great run, 4th and 5th.
A knockout punch in the constructors' fight with Haas.
Another thing, I have this in my list right here. You took the entire midfield constructors battle, which is major money, huge money to these teams, and you threw that in a blender in that race and just said, spit it out. And Toro Rosso's right there now.
Yep, Toro Rosso had a great showing. Their 2nd podium. You could argue that this is their best season ever.
Yeah.
The only other podium they've had in their however many year existence since they've changed from Minardi. What was that, 2006? When Minardi became Toro Rosso?
I think so.
They're going out in style. I don't know if the AlphaTauri is going to be as lucky as the Toro Rosso brand has been in 2019, but Kvyat 3rd in Germany, and now Gasly gets the second best finish ever in the team's history.
You'd
have to go back to Sebastian Vettel's soaking wet maiden victory at Monza in 2008.
That might be the most underrated duo on the grid.
Kvyat and Gasly?
Yeah.
Well, they both have that perception of being damaged goods. They've both been demoted from Red Bull, but they've landed on their feet and they're just elbows out scrapping.
Yeah.
I think they both earned that position for next year. I'm glad to see that they'll be back.
Looking at my notes before we get an email, people saying we don't know what we're talking about. It was Ron Meadows, not Rod. I think I said Rod. Sometimes my mouth gets working faster than my brain. Ron Meadows is sporting director at Mercedes, who literally walked in the room and said, Lewis says it's his fault, and walked out. I mean, what's the FIA supposed to do at that point in time?
I mean, another third-place finish in the season of Lewis Hamilton, the career of Lewis Hamilton, doesn't mean a great deal, whereas he probably feels terrible about what happened to Albon. And it also opens the door for Carlos Sainz. So there's a lot of happy people.
Yeah.
Even as a Lewis Hamilton fan, I'm disappointed that he didn't get to fight Max and see if he could beat him. And also, I just hated to see that Red Bull turned around with a lap and a half from his first podium, because he was going to be on the podium no matter what, even if Lewis got by him. You don't want to ding the guy for defending, but he did leave that door wide open. I think that is a lesson for Alex Albon about how to race at the sharp end of the grid when there's a lot on the line. It's very different from racing in the midfield.
Well, I think, and his point of view was he knew Lewis was going to pass him eventually, and he didn't think Lewis would take that chance because it was so obvious Lewis was going to be able to pass him a couple corners later. But still, you just can't assume that when you're racing at the front. And that's where we've talked before about the guys who run in the back, their speed compared to the guys up front, and is it car, is it driver? It's a combination of both, but the guys in the back have no idea how to race the top guys because they haven't been there. They're used to either getting out of the way. That was the thing with Ocon that was so strange with Verstappen the year before, was like, you just don't race the leader. It's not that you couldn't on fresher tires. You just don't. And for Verstappen, he's probably never had a lap guy try to go around. These are all lessons that everybody learned, and it was good to see Max kind of get that. You know, you never say a track owes you one, right? Because it's all in your hands and it's all in the other driver's hands. But if you're going to say that's a thing, Interlagos owed him one, and he got it. So that was good to see. Eric, I want to ask you, we've had some duds of Formula One races, but not too many. But we've had some great ones this year. Where does this one stack up entire year?
In terms of chaos, it's second only
to Germany.
Yeah. Anytime that you get the pecking order thrown out the window at the end, and I'm not saying it was artificial, but what we don't see in F1 these days is a lot of attrition. Mechanical, you don't get a huge amount of crashes. I think I talked about this earlier this year with the engine rule about, these engines used to be built to last one race, and it was expensive that way, but if they were wound so tight that they're only supposed to make it the distance of one race, the odds of one failing, as opposed to an engine that's built to last 7 or 8 races, you don't get the opportunities where there's a lot of mechanical attrition or whatever it was that took out all these cars between Hamilton's penalty, Bottas's hydraulics, the 2 red cars crashing into each other, Albon pointing the wrong way coming to the penultimate lap. You don't get a lot of opportunity races, and that's why they're so memorable. I think what might get lost in the shuffle was how good the racing was. Lewis Hamilton passing Max Verstappen passing Lewis Hamilton back, drama on pit road. There was just an awful lot to chew on. There was never a dull moment in this race. So I think for sheer entertainment value, I thought the Hungarian Grand Prix was really good, but you had to play the long game on that one. That was hey, when is this going to get exciting? There was a lot of setup for one good payoff here. This race was almost all payoff. So I put it towards the top of the list for this year.
Yeah, I had it number 1 because I thought there was racing everywhere. While we had a wreck with the Ferraris, they were racing each other. They had raced side by side down the hill and were drag racing down even Bottas, his engine expiring, or the issue he had with the engine, I'm not so sure wasn't because he was running too close to the car. I forget who he was he racing with Albon at that time?
I believe so.
And Albon wouldn't give him, and they kept telling him, you've got to back off and cool the car, and he never did. he kept trying to stick it in there, so I'm not so sure that wasn't a racing incident. So I had it 1 with Austria 2 and Germany 3. I thought the racing at the end at Austria when we had, Leclerc and Verstappen. I thought
that was a good one.
I thought that was really good. I thought Hungary was really good, too. We've had some great races in this thing, so it was a lot of fun. I thought it was a tremendous race. Cannot wait for Abu Dhabi. I wish I could get on an airplane and go. I am so psyched for this final race. I am so disappointed that it's almost done. Like, only one more race. I just feel like, for whatever reason this season, every week it ramps up. It's just been such a great season. I cannot wait for Abu Dhabi. I can't even wait for Australia. Like, it's just been so good.
Hope springs eternal, especially for the modern-day Ferrari fan. I did want one last note about Lewis Hamilton.
Yep.
Even though he took the penalty, he still finished 7th. Now, it could have, because of the safety car bunching everyone up, a 5-second penalty to a front runner at the end of a race usually doesn't, maybe cost him a spot or two. He tumbled from 3rd down to 7th because everyone was all packed up with that 2-lap shootout at the end of that race, demoting him to 7th, but he is still in the points. Tony, he has scored in every single race this year.
He's incredible.
And that is now 32 consecutive races in the points. One more, and he'll tie his own record at 33 for the most consecutive races in the points in Formula One. That's, even when you're bad, he's still having a good day.
Yeah, he's incredible. I actually sat and watched on YouTube one of his karting races from when he was 11.
Oh, he's just carving him up.
Ridiculous. Hey, I know you have a extended Morse code
a lot
report.
To talk about, yeah.
There is some news out of Formula One that I want to drop on you. According to Toby Gruner, who writes for one of the German Formula One magazines, online things, the FIA has apparently seized parts from the Ferrari fuel system. They have seized parts from one of the Ferrari cars, one of the customer cars, and as well as another car on the grid, which they haven't named, to take a look at what the teams are doing. This all seems to be in response for all of the hubbub that came out just before Austin, kind of led by Red Bull, as to Ferrari possibly leaking oil into the engine to get the extra horsepower. So I don't know if there's any truth to this. This is what Toby, he's a verified guy. Mm-hmm. It's in his thing.
I read the headline, and it felt like a tabloid to me.
It did to
I'm
me.
Like,
that's why I'm just throwing it out there.
I'm going to go to racer.com, autosport.com, motorsport, and F1's website and not see a word about it, I'm like, this sounds like putting the cart before the horse.
I throw it out there.
Yeah.
I throw it out there.
You like to stir things. I know you.
Esteban Ocon will be released early from his Mercedes deal. So as soon as the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is over, Ocon will be released from his Mercedes reserve driver role. He'll be able to start fresh with Renault. Remember, they have a tire test of the 2020 Pirelli tire at Abu Dhabi once that's over. So he'll be driving one of the yellow cars with Danny Ricciardo, so he'll be able to get his...
That's a pretty formidable lineup.
Yeah,
right
it
there.
is.
If they put a good car underneath them, might be overly optimistic, thinking that they could compete for wins or podiums next year.
No.
But if they get the rules right for 2021, that's a real solid lineup.
This was the interesting part of this, though. Apparently, after the race, Petronas, they have Lewis doing a bunch of stuff, so he can't do the test, which means Mercedes is going to call on their other reserve driver.
That young Mr. Russell.
It is. It's George Russell. So George Russell's going to have to drive the Mercedes, which
who's in the Williams? Would that be
Nicholas Latifi? So Latifi may do this whole test before they even announce him as a driver, because he's the backup driver for Williams. So a lot of young guys or new people in new places going to happen. And that made me think back at Williams. Back in 2015, they had a pretty formidable lineup. They had Valtteri Bottas. They had Felipe Massa. Do you remember who their reserve driver was?
In 2015? Ooh, you're catching me off guard.
I know. I didn't know this until I looked it up.
It wasn't Esteban Ocon, was it?
It was not.
Probably wouldn't have been Pascal Wehrlein.
It was not. It was Susie Wolff.
Oh, that's right.
Who I'm not sure was Wolff at the time. She may have been.
I think she was, yeah.
But it's Toto Wolff's wife. She was a Scottish racing driver, and she was the Williams reserve driver on that team.
It all comes full circle.
Found that interesting. I didn't realize Susie Wolf had raced, but now I do, because once I fell into that hole, as one does, I'm on the internet all night watching her and Toto driving Mercedes at different tracks and switching off. And I was like, wow, this lady can really wheel a car. So I was like, who is Susie Wolf? Where did he meet this model? Race car driver.
Yep.
Pretty darn cool. All right, we got to take our first break here on American Racing Snobs. When we return, the long, extended Morse code report. Please tell me you're going to talk Macau, because I watched it over the weekend.
Oh, did you? Yes, I am. It is on my list.
Great. We'll talk about that and much more when we return on American Racing Snobs.
Here's your chance to win a set of your very own Hercules tires. Go to HerculesTires.com/MRN. Simply register, and each month we'll give away one set of tires. Hercules Tires has the value, selection, and industry-leading mileage coverage to get you wherever you need to go, no matter where the road takes you. Register now for your chance to win a set of Hercules tires at HerculesTires.com/MRN. Hercules Tires. Ride on our street.
Hello and welcome back to American Racing Snobs. Eric Morse alongside Tony Rizzuti. So much to talk about in the world of snobby racing over the last couple of weeks. I know we cut it short last week. I will get back to some of those things that I had on my notes from 2 weeks ago, and we couldn't fit that into our action-packed greatest of all time debate show. However, Tony, I want to get started with some fresh news. IndyCar. Lots going on, especially at Ed Carpenter Racing.
Oh, the big rumor that was going to be Nico Hülkenberg's spot.
That is no longer the rumor.
It is called Nico.
He is confirmed that they have parted ways with Spencer Pigot, which was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I thought he ran good for
he
being
had a runner-up
rookie.
finish. He's been there 2 seasons now, full seasons, I believe.
Yeah, rookie.
And then had a part-time year as well. The full-time Ed Carpenter seat will now be occupied by
my drinking buddy.
Yeah, your Indy Lights runner-up, Rinus VeeKay.
Yes,
from the Netherlands.
Yes,
confirmed for the full season, replacing Spencer Pigot.
You cannot stop the freaky deaky Dutch.
Did you know that's not his last name?
What's his real last name?
It's Van Countout.
Don't count him out.
Van Countout. I practiced that. You know the comedian Louis C.K.?
I do.
You know C.K.
You saw him recently.
Yeah, I did. C.K. the initials. That's not obviously his given name. He's got I think it's a Hungarian name, Zekeli, but it's pronounced C.K. So he did a similar thing when he moved to the United States. I just learned this morning that they just took for Van Countout, they took V and K and just spelled it out into V.K. V-E-E-K-A-Y is his now legal last name, much to our benefit because it's way easier to say.
Yes.
Rinus VeeKay. We're still trying to figure out who is going to be his teammate. We know it's going to be Ed Carpenter on the ovals. They're still working out the details on who's going to be his co-driver for the road courses. That's where Nico Hülkenberg's name had been popping up, but Ed Carpenter says, we have a driver. It is not Nico Hülkenberg. We will announce it soon. We're still working on the details. Wondering if that's an opportunity for James Hinchcliffe, maybe?
I'd love to see that.
I mean, you hate not to see him in the full series, especially since he's
ever figure out
so
where
good at ovals, too.
Where's Marcus Ericsson going?
Ganassi.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, they've got I
saw him
that
on the
all
pit box.
Swedish lineup with Rosenqvist and Ericsson, and then the honorary Swede Scott Dixon.
Yeah, he was on the pit box at Brazil with Alfa Romeo. Again, still a paid reserve driver for Alfa Romeo.
More drivers on the move. This time in IMSA. To no one's surprise, Jordan Taylor moving to Corvette.
Come on to Corvette.
Corvette replacing Jan Magnussen. And what I like about this is you get to see Jordan Taylor compete at Le Mans again. We missed him the last couple of years. He had previously driven for that team on a one-off with his brother at Le Mans for Team Corvette.
I still say Jan Magnussen better than Kevin Magnussen, but that's just me.
Kevin Magnussen has more podiums.
It's just me.
Than Jan Magnussen.
Just me.
That means there's a vacancy at Wayne Taylor Racing. They did confirm that Renger van der Zande, another Dutch, will be back. But it's Ryan Briscoe moving over from the now defunct 4GT program, joining Wayne Taylor Racing. And they also announced that Scott Dixon will be their endurance guest driver.
I think you hinted at this a while ago. You felt that that's probably the place those 4GT guys were going.
It was definitely a possibility. I think the driver that I'm most curious about now when it comes to silly season is where does your buddy Colin Brown end up? Because he is a hot shoe and he is still available as far as I can tell for anybody's services in IMSA.
Colin's the perfect guy to be teamed up with one of the gentleman amateur drivers. I think
he still won races with John Bennett as his teammate.
I know it, but I think that works really well for him. I think he's a good teammate in that. I think he can race in anything. I think Colin's a tremendous talent, but I think he fits really well in that, bringing a businessman who wants to be a racer on the weekends along. I think Bennett was a little bit better than that. Obviously had some skills, but I think that mode is where Colin should be, and I think he can make a really good living doing that, to be honest.
One thing that this kind of got me thinking about, if the 10 car is now confirmed to have Renger van der Zande, Ryan Briscoe, Scott Dixon, they've already confirmed Kamui Kobayashi is
back. That's
back.
Your guy right there. You love Kamui.
Kamui. That means likely no Fernando Alonso to defend his crown at the Rolex 24. Don't worry, he'll be plenty busy. In fact, I have an update on Fernando Alonso real quick.
Oh, let me put a little code going here.
Yeah.
Give me a little ding, 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 ding.
Fernando Alonso was on the podium a week and a half ago, finished third in the rally raid held in Saudi Arabia as he prepares for his debut in the Dakar Rally. So this is all good things if you're an Alonso fan. I think he's on pace a lot quicker than most people expected, so we'll see what he can do at the end of January in the Dakar Rally, which will be taking place in Saudi Arabia for the first time. Also in the news, Alonso rumored to be splitting with McLaren. Do you think this is too little too late to get something going with Andretti for the Indy 500? There is one major hurdle, and it starts with an H and ends with an A. Honda. Still have to repair that relationship if they're going to do something.
That's unrepairable.
I wonder if they'd let it go, kind of like, remember when Renault and Red Bull were feuding the first time, and they ended up rebranding the engine Tag Heuer instead of calling it a Renault? I wonder if there could be a rebrand of a Honda engine, because right now, I think Fernando was not too pleased with the way his Indy 500 performance went with the McLaren factory team, with support from Carlin and the Chevy engines. He wants more of that good stuff, more of that Andretti, Honda, McLaren type situation that he was in 2017. We'll see what he's able to put together. I'm not holding my breath for a reunion just yet. Extreme E, have you heard of it?
No.
Think of Dakar Rally meets Formula E. It's a series that's going to be launched in 2021 by the FIA, and it's going to essentially take all electric rally cars and take them to exotic locations all around the earth, places that are hard to get to, places that specifically have been affected by climate change, to raise awareness. Get a load of the invites for the driver roster for Season 1. Now, these aren't confirmed, but these are the drivers who have been nominated and are in conversations about full-time rides in this series. Karun Chandhok, Loic Duval, Daniel Abt, Andre Lauderer, Lucas Degrassi, Bruno Senna, our W Series champion Jamie Chadwick, Catherine Legg, Nelson Piquet Jr., and your favorite, Billy Monger.
Ooh, I love that.
This could be really fun.
It could be, because all we needed was another racing series, but at least I like where this one's going, because we got the word that we talked about just briefly last week that Formula One by 2030 will be completely carbon-free, which starts to point everybody to isn't that what Formula E is? But yeah, you can't ignore electric vehicles at this time. And if you can find a smaller, fun series with some cool names, and, Shandok at this point is really more of a media guy, especially over in England, than he is still kind of considered a racer, though he does race still. But I think some of those names there are publicity names, but I'm all for it. That'd be fun to watch.
Scheduled to debut in 2021, so we'll keep an eye on that. I have seen the future of American Formula One racing drivers.
I
have seen a bright star.
Was he on the podium at Macau by chance?
He sure as shit was.
Yes, he was. Very impressed.
How about Logan Sargent?
Yes.
A former karting champion, younger brother of Dalton Sargent,
yes,
who I believe ran some truck series and some K&N series races in NASCAR. I believe he's a Florida native. He was the star of that race. If you do want to watch the race, and I recommend you do,
yes.
I'm trying to think of how to describe Macau.
This is a highly recommend.
Macau is like Talladega meets Monaco.
Yeah, to me it reminded me if you took Baku and Monaco and squeezed it even narrower.
And just run it through a funhouse mirror.
Yeah.
It is a mega street circuit.
Awesome.
It might be the most intimidating street circuit I have ever seen.
I'm told they run bikes on that.
They do. They're insane. Absolutely.
So cool.
Yeah, completely without regard for their own safety.
Thoroughly enjoyed watching that race.
It's streaming for free on motorsport.com. If you just go to motorsport.com.
It's on YouTube, too.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched it on YouTube.
Quick recap of that race. So if you don't want it spoiled for you, you can do my patented, whenever anyone's talking F1 at the NASCAR track, I put my fingers in my ears. You know that trick.
Yeah.
It's effective.
Sarah McLaren. Please, I might have to run that promo again.
Let's do that.
Hi, I'm Sarah McLaren. There's a real problem facing F1 racing fans in America these days. Spoilers. With race times ranging between 1 and 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, many people have to DVR their F1 races because they have jobs, weekend lives, or enjoy sleep, and are not fortunate enough to be up before God's hour to watch in real time. Please stop posting spoilers. Your donation will cost you $0. That's less than the cost of your next breath. Won't you help out your fellow fan? Please put your phone down right now and stop posting spoilers. Thank you.
Jori Vips was on pole position, the young driver from Estonia.
He was very impressive.
Yep. Logan Sargent started in 6th. Row 13 is where the big names were. Some troubles in qualifying for the two-time defending winner Dan Ticktum, the former Red Bull junior, and David Schumacher, son of former Macau winner Ralf Schumacher. However, it was Richard Verschoor getting Vips on a restart. They were trading the lead back and forth. Lots of drafting, the DRS, the long straightaway coming up.
That car looked like a Ferrari down the straightaways. Every time he got to the straightaway, it would just go. It was how he made because I was looking at it. Those cars are pretty much spec for the most part, aren't they?
Yeah. It's a Formula 3 car.
But his car looked like it was completely trimmed out. It was so fast down the straightaway.
That was such an exciting race because this is the first time they've used the new Formula 3 car, which
I liked it a lot.
It's much quicker than it used to be.
I happened to see one at Austin with the halo on it, the layout of it. My son fell in love with it instantly. I really like it. It's just such a difficult series because the FIA and what's now Liberty Media, what was Bernie Eccleston, they put no additional money into it. They just went with the fact that there'd be 40 or 50 rich dads that would pay for their kids to drive these cars and continue to write million-dollar checks with no real path to anywhere.
And then somebody tried
it's
to
a
convince
shame
you to
it's so
put
good
your son in one?
In an F4.
Yeah.
The guy, and I'm like, he's 10. He's like, we're taking applications. I'm like, damn.
Applications
and
as
then a
in
check.
Yeah, just a check.
Yep.
That's your full application. Make sure you sign the front.
Yeah, but that car looked totally trimmed out and looked so good, and it was good to see Sophia back in.
Sophia Florsch, the driver who had
facing her fears and being back in it.
Airplane of crash of a wreck last year. I still can't believe that she got out of that car. She did suffer back injuries, I think some compression fractures. Yeah. This is her first race back.
Yeah, she looked good until
back to the belly of the beast.
Yeah, until the car kind of conked out on her. She was in there trading paint with everybody. She was in there scrapping. I liked it.
So Sargent really put on the show. He was the star of the race, like I said, from 6th to 5th, and on the restart goes to 4th. Got all the way up to 3rd before he ran out of time. This is a relatively short race, only 15 laps.
Yeah.
And it had a couple safety cars in it.
The one just...
Oh, yeah, guy who kissed the inside wall and then
there was nothing left of the back of that car. It even caught on fire at one point. I don't remember who it was, but he destroyed that car.
The fight for the win came down to our pole sitter, Jori Vips from Estonia. However, he couldn't hold off Richard Verschoor. No. Guess where he's from?
Netherlands.
Oh, you bet.
The Dutch are taking over. Just paint the whole world orange.
Let's see what else was going on. Oh, I skipped over WEC last week because we were in such a hurry. They were racing at Shanghai, and the heavily handicapped Toyotas were beaten to pole position by Rebellion, driven by Gustavo Menezes, Norman Nato, and Bruno Senna. However, that car had a terrible start to the race, dropped all the way back to 6th. However, they worked their way through the order, and they were able to claim victory, breaking Toyota's 7-race win streak that dates back to the 6 Hours of Silverstone in 2018. Privateer wins the race, but got to admit, it felt hollow. We knew it was all BOP. They just absolutely hamstrung those Toyota hybrids. I cannot wait.
Was that the Gazoo team?
Yeah. I can't wait for the new era of WEC. I'm hoping that these hypercars make things a little bit better, because right now this one car at the front that's way better than everyone else, and then trying to balance it out, it's not my cup of tea.
I hate BOP. I get it, and I understand it, but I don't like it.
Let's see, LMP2, it was the Yoda Orica winning with Anthony Davidson alongside Antonio Felix da Costa and Roberto Gonzalez. GT Pro, it was AF Corsa Ferrari crossing the finish line first with James Collado and Alessandro Perguidi. They have since been disqualified for a ride height violation, handing the win to the Porsche duo of Kevin Estrie and Michael Christensen, leading a Porsche 1-2. That 911 looks like it's never, ever going to lose another race, whether it's IMSA, WEC. I'm pretty sure it could win the Tour de France now.
They can't find BOP to get that car beat.
That car is unbeatable right now. GTAM, Aston Martin stays hot. They go first and third after being split by the Ben Keating Porsche. That's going to take some getting used to. He's been running Mercedes in IMSA the last couple of years, and also famously won Le Mans in the Ford GT Privateer before being disqualified for a fuel infringement.
And he made all his money selling Vipers in Texas.
Yep, but right now he's driving that Porsche. That's, like I said, going to take some getting used to.
Somebody's going to correct me on that. He made a lot of money selling Vipers.
Up next is Bahrain. That'll be in mid-December. Some other news in WEC. The Brazil round scheduled for February at Interlagos, the track that we just saw this weekend in Formula One. That is in danger. It's been absent from the schedule since 2014, but it was added for this second super season of WEC. But it sounds like they haven't been paying their bills. They're trying to work out a deal to save the race, but right now it doesn't look good. Other huge news. Teased the hypercars earlier. Did you see who unveiled their plans to rejoin the LMP1 class with the hypercars in 2022?
I think you told me. And I don't remember.
It's the home team, Tony. Peugeot. Peugeot is back. 2022 hypercar unveiled. They'll be joining Aston Martin, Toyota, and the American manufacturer Glickenhaus are confirmed for the top class. So hopefully that'll give us a little bit more of what we're used to in these WEC races.
I hope these cars are cool. Obviously, they're going to look really cool, but I feel like we've been down this hypercar path before.
Was it late 90s with the McLaren F1?
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm skeptical, but something's got to change. Change is good right now when it comes to this.
Yes.
Peugeot, as you'll recall, last raced a turbo diesel LMP1 car as recently as 2011, and they won in 2009. You know, this got me thinking, you know who one of their stalwart drivers was back then?
Who?
Jacques Villeneuve.
Ooh.
Do you think that he's young enough to try to come back and maybe be a third driver at Le Mans?
No.
How funny would that be, though?
Has he done anything since he left the trucks, really?
Yeah. He drove a little bit of supercars, drove some, I think, some
Have they
DTM.
found a fire suit that fits him yet?
He drove Formula E, didn't he? Ran a couple Formula E races. No, his Taylor is the worst.
Awful.
I think he charges by the by square footage of the Nomex fireproof material.
Though I bet when if you get those things too tight in a single seater, those things will grab you where you don't want to be grabbed. So a little extra space so you can kind of pull that and yank. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You got to get
a little space
organized
for your boys there when you get ready.
Organized.
You got to have room so when you grab them to throw them up on the dash, they're there. Doesn't do any good if they're stuck to your seat.
See, I just think it would be hilarious if Villeneuve somehow pulled off a way to exploit this weak era in LMP1 to win Le Mans and beat Fernando Alonso to the Triple Crown. Because remember, he came damn close when he drove for Peugeot. That's what got me thinking about it, was when he took on the Audis. I think, who was on his team? Was that Simon Pagenaud and Sebastian Bourdais?
Might have been.
Former drivers all for Peugeot in the factory team last time they assaulted Le Mans. But Jacques Villeneuve, a former Monaco Grand Prix winner. Jacques Villeneuve, a former Indy 500 winner back in 1995. That would be really, really funny if he was able, if either he or Juan Pablo were able to find a way to beat Alonso to the punch.
Start the rumor here.
Yeah, well, Indy's going to be Indy and Monaco are the two hard ones to really get, because you have 3 drivers per car, and it happens to be a little bit of a weak field at the front of the grid right now in WEC. There's some opportunity to go out there and win a couple Le Mans trophies, Fernando Alonso. Anyway, last thing I want to talk about, Australian supercars. It is
Does
official.
their season ever end?
One more race.
Oh, my God.
One more race. It is official. Scott McLaughlin has clinched the title in Sandown for the second straight year. However, there was still more controversy for his DGR Team Penske outfit, stemming from their performance at the Bathurst 1000. Apparently, the engine that they used in qualifying only, not the race, exceeded the valve lift height on the motor in qualifying. That earned them a $30,000 fine and exclusion from qualifying from the record books, even though we already qualified and already ran the race. He keeps the win. And according to the steward's report, there was no real performance advantage, but rules is rules.
That's true.
However, a lot of people already think that his Bathurst win was tainted because of the actions of his teammate, Fabian Coulthard, holding up the pack there under a late safety car. He will forever be known as the winner of the great race in 2019, but a lot of people kind of looking at that as, hey, I'm not sure if this counts in my mind.
Speaking of safety car, not to jump back into the Brazilian Grand Prix or the Brazil Grand Prix, Max Verstappen waited until, the green flag waved and still I was waiting for Albon to just go.
I thought there was going to be a huge crash.
I did too. That was the craziest, he waited and that was unbelievable.
It was slow motion restart.
It was.
You know who did one of those once? Remember when John Andretti won Daytona?
I do remember they won. I don't remember the restart.
It was a one-lap sprint because we didn't have overtime or green-white checkers.
That was the 98 car, right? That RCA car?
Yeah, the RCA car. Yeah. And he had Earnhardt right behind him. And I swear he crossed the start-finish line with the green flag
and
the white flag out. He was in second gear and 35 miles per hour, just backing him up, and then he went. Ended up. Hey, if you can beat Dale Earnhardt in a one-lap sprint at Daytona, it takes every trick in the book. And our good buddy John was able to get that. What was that, July of 1997?
Yeah, I think when Max goes back and watches the video of that, he'll probably decide not to do that one again because Albon just about pounced.
Yeah, the rules, super gray area. A lot of open for interpretation on the rule book on restarts. It's not like NASCAR where it's well-defined. You go between here, and if you don't, here's how it works. It's kind of the wild, wild west right now in F1 and apparently in supercars because of what we saw at the Bathurst 1000. Sandown, doubleheader weekend. Actually, no, this was a single one endurance race, and it had the final appearance of the co-drivers. Shane Van Gisbergen and Garth Tander had a great run going before they had a mechanical failure, handing the win to their Triple Eight teammates of Jamie Whincup and Craig Lowndes. One other note from the Aussie Supercars before their finale, a doubleheader weekend at Newcastle. One of the best drivers at Newcastle, in my opinion, was Simona Di Silvestro over the years. Mm-hmm. She has announced that she is leaving the series, but keeping the door open for a return for the endurance races in the future. Remember, she recently accepted a position within Porsche's Formula E team as their simulator driver.
Very nice.
The Swiss Miss.
Good stuff. Hey, you mentioned the fun we had last week with the best of the rest. Did you get any feedback from anybody as to our lists?
I ran into Frank Wilson at Homestead, and we chatted a little bit about that. Yeah, I don't know if he got to listen to the show or not, but we were chatting about who had who at number one, and in my unofficial evening of things, Jimmy Clark got the most votes if we assigned a point value to them to be considered the greatest of the greatest if we add up the expert opinions that we included in that show. But he didn't get a single first-place vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I never did get David Hobbs.
The Matt Crafton of the top five.
I never did get David Hobbs to give me a proper ranking, but I do know that David considers Jimmy to be the best that he ever saw.
Might be a good question for he and Matchett when they're here in Charlotte. What is that, December 2nd, I believe?
Here, I'll pull up the info right now. In fact, I got a text message from
We definitely want to go
Diffie.
there. Would love to do a live show from there, maybe kick it off for them.
So do a that would be amusing to have. Their show is basically former TV announcers talking about the season that was, and now you want to talk about the announcers who are going to talk about
the difference is they get paid and we don't.
They do. Now, Diffie, I actually saw him in Miami this past weekend, and he had asked to please spread the word. This is going to be a really fun night. A reunion of sorts of the NBC Sports crew, minus Will Buxton, of course, who would have to
love Will Buxton
come over from
his paddock pass pre and post race things he does is amazing. I love Will Buxton. please try to get him on the show. I know you've reached out occasionally, but
I'll see if I can rattle his cage, get his attention.
Would love to have him on the show.
For those listeners in the Charlotte area, it's called A Night at the Races, December 2nd at the Booth Playhouse at Blumenthal Performing Arts Center in Charlotte. Should be a really good time, and I think I'll be there.
Oh, I'm definitely want to go.
Let's do this. Let's do this.
That'll be a lot of fun. The only feedback I got was a lot of people that were kind of on my side that with Schumacher's numbers, take the passion out of it, with his numbers, it's hard to not have him at least third. You could argue the first and second, but he's at least got to be in your top three, is where most of the people that were kind of giving me some feedback, and I kind of agree with them. It's kind of hard to ignore it, and if Lewis goes on to tie him in championships and beat him in wins, it's kind of hard not to put Lewis at the top.
Can I put some emotion back into it?
Sure, absolutely.
I, once upon a time, I'm going to name drop the name you just dropped. I was having a pint with Will Buxton ahead of the German Grand Prix. I'd say this was maybe 2012. And Will said that he wouldn't put Schumacher in his top 10.
No, I hear that.
Yeah.
And I understand why. I mean, Schumacher wasn't the cleanest of drivers. He wasn't the best of teammates. But those numbers are ridiculous. 155 podiums, 91 wins, 68 poles. Of course, the poles sounded great until Lewis started just shredding that. But
if Lewis has one or two more Lewis Hamilton-like seasons, both of those records
is there
fall.
Anything right now that doesn't make you think that Mercedes doesn't start where they left off? I mean, I'm more nervous about Red Bull now for next year than I am Ferrari.
It's hard to say. These days can't last forever.
Nothing does. I mean, we've seen that in all of motorsports.
Hard work, budget, and sheer out cleverness have gotten Mercedes to where they are. Sooner or later, they are going to get toppled. Mm-hmm. Does it happen next year? Does it happen in 2021? That's what we're all tuning in for.
Yep. Well, we appreciate you guys tuning into the show as always. Be sure to subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. I'd like to see a lot more people jump on YouTube. I know we're not a video type of thing, but it's an easy place to listen to it where you can pick up, leave off. Obviously, we love the folks that are listening on Apple. I think we had close to 3,000 people listening on Apple Podcasts, which is tremendous. We'd love to grow that audience. Thanks for listening on Spotify. Thanks for the feedback when it comes to the list. As always, send us a note. Whether you agree, disagree, we don't mind. We love the debate. For Eric Morse, I'm Tony Rizzuti. Thanks so much for listening. Next week, we'll chat a little Abu Dhabi. Our final chance at picks. You had the winner this week.
Only because I jumped you.
Maybe I can get it next week.
I read the weather and jumped you, and it didn't seem to matter.
All right, we'll talk to you next time on American Racing Snobs. See ya.